All right. So, quick overview of what we're going to be covering in our time together. So, this is about the National Science Foundation Graduate Research Fellowship. I'll provide a very brief overview of what this fellowship is in just a moment for those of you who are not familiar, but I suspect that most of you already are. But we're here to talk about what the process looks like for reviewing this particular fellowship, understanding what exactly that looks like when you hit submit. And then really we're going to be focusing on unpacking the two major review criteria that NSF employs, the only review criteria that NSF employs, intellectual merit and broader impacts. How are these defined by the National Science Foundation, and what might that look like in the context of an application for this particular opportunity from NSF? And then we'll take a look at some sample reviewer comments that have been left on actual applications. So you can get a sense of some of the things that reviewers have paid attention to. And we'll be building on this in our workshops in July. We'll be focusing on the personal statement and then on the research statement as well. But in order to really make the most of thinking about how to approach those two particular written documents here, it's important to get a good understanding of what exactly you're trying to convince reviewers of, what exactly NSF is looking to invest in and support here. So that's what we're going to be taking a look at this evening. I'll be giving you a worksheet at the end as well that can help with some brainstorming potentially if you're looking for some ideas about how you might be able to address these particular review criteria as you're thinking about your own potential application here. So again, very quick overview. I suspect that most of you have had a chance to investigate this already, but the National Science Foundation Graduate Research Fellowship is a award that provides 3 years of support in the form of an annual stipend and an amount that covers the cost of your tuition and fees for the purpose of pursuing a master's or a doctoral degree in a research-based eligible STEM field. You can see on the GRFP website all of the eligible fields. We are not going to be taking a deep dive in any of that here this evening. We did an earlier workshop on that. Those materials are available in the Teams group that if you don't already have access to, you will be getting access to later this week here. But just a couple points here. It's a flexible award for current undergraduates who are considering perhaps a range of different graduate programs. As long as it is a program in an eligible field that is research-based, you can take that award with you. There's no restrictions on where you can do it at, as long as it's an accredited US-based institution. And there's no sort of obligation to the National Science Foundation or the US government after the time that you have completed your fellowship here. It's for your first graduate degree, and you do have to be a US citizen or permanent resident to be eligible for it. Full eligibility criteria, again, available at nsfgrfp.org. And you can find in our Teams group the most recent solicitation, which has a much more detailed explanation of all of that. So that's a very quick overview here. And again, if anyone has specific questions about the award, I encourage you to meet with me to discuss them, or you can ask your question a little bit later in our time together this evening. All right. So let's take a look at what this process actually looks like when you submit your application here. So the GRFP is typically due in the 3rd week of October. I suspect in the next couple of weeks that this official solicitation will be released. It usually comes out in early July. And once it does, I will be notifying everyone who's interested about what the latest details are on that. But we're expecting something sometime in mid to late October here. And when NSF receives their applications after the due date there, they'll initially undergo a review by NSF employees for making sure that everybody meets the general eligibility criteria for that. And if that's the case, then applications are assigned to a wide variety of review panels made up usually by scientists in a larger field of study, that you've indicated here. And a reviewer is typically going to read somewhere between 20 to maybe 30 applications. And that's always useful to keep in mind, because you want to be trying to think like a reviewer when you end up writing your application there. So this is somebody who's going to have a fairly significant number of applications that they're going to have to read. They're going to be under a bit of time pressure to provide comments and provide evaluation there. And so, thinking about how to make sure that what you're doing stands out to them and is memorable, and then it doesn't do something that provides an easy excuse to be to be eliminated from consideration is always going to be helpful here. As they are reviewing these application materials, NSF employs what they call a holistic review. The eligibility criteria that we're going to be talking about, intellectual merit and broader impacts, is something that is supposed to be demonstrated throughout the application. It is something that is not just in one particular document. It's something that should be reflected in all parts of the application, which includes the personal statement of the research statement, the 3 letters of recommendation, the transcript, and the research work educational experiences that you will input into the online review panel there. And so while within this particular written statement, there will be special sections labeled intellectual merit and broader impacts, which we will discuss in our later sessions on those particular documents there. Reviewers are meant to look for evidence of your intellectual merit and your broader impacts throughout the entire application. And then on the basis of the input of the reviewers, who will then meet in panels and discuss their applications, NSF will then make final decisions about who is able to be awarded a fellowship based on their budget, and some kind of internal evaluations around that. So that is the broad overview of how the review process operates in terms of who's going to be reading it. And that's something that takes place over the winter in advance of announcements being made in the spring, usually sometime late March into the first part of April. And I mentioned these 2 criteria here already, but I want to define them here, and we'll unpack them both in much more detail a little bit later on here. But broadly speaking, the 2 criteria that you are evaluated on that are supposed to be weighed equally by reviewers are intellectual merit and broader impacts. And intellectual merit simply refers to the potential to advance knowledge. What is the contribution to science, to the particular discipline that is being made by you as an individual, by the research that you're proposing here? Broader impacts is, as the name suggests, thinking about what is it that you are doing and what is it that your research is doing that goes beyond just the intellectual contribution there. How does it benefit society? How does it contribute to the achievement of specific desired societal outcomes? That's NSF's particular phrasing there. And in fact, there's some discussion that this criteria may actually be renamed societal benefits. There's talk about potentially in the next year, NSF adopting that language to try to underscore that what they mean by this is really how does this research benefit, how does this activity or research benefit larger society? We'll look at some specific examples that NSF highlights to demonstrate what exactly they have in mind when it comes to that. But that's broadly what we can think about when we think about these particular terms being used to evaluate your proposal here. And then if you look in the GRFP and any of the NSF documents, you'll find this particular language here that encourages applicants to think about how reviewers are going to be looking for evidence of this in the following ways here. So this is how they kind of unpack intellectual merit and broader impacts in a little bit more detail. And again, this is language that you can find in the official solicitation for the Graduate Research Fellowship Program. It's also found in the Proposal and Application Preparation Guide, which is the official document for all NSF awards here as well. And so intellectual merit, what is the potential for the activity to advance knowledge and understanding within its own field or across different fields? How is it going to then, broader impacts, benefit society and advance those desirable societal outcomes? To what extent do the proposed activities suggest and explore creative, original, or potentially transformative concepts? So again, that's an intellectual merit piece there. Is the plan for carrying out the proposed activities well-reasoned, well-organized, sound rationale? Is there a mechanism to assess success? So again, intellectual merit, research feasibility, how qualified is the individual or the team to conduct the proposed activities there? Are there adequate resources available to the individual to carry out the proposed activities? So these are some of the questions that reviewers are supposed to be thinking about when they're unpacking a particular proposal, thinking particularly about the research part of this as well here. And I think it's always helpful to really dig into the actual language that a foundation or an organization uses because they want you to understand what it is that they're all about, and they want you to understand what they're looking for, so that you can make sure you're highlighting the aspects of your experience and of your goals and of your research ideas that really align with that there as well. So again, this is taken verbatim from the documentation that NSF provides here, and these are instructions that reviewers are given to be thinking about that as well. So with that in mind, with that kind of guidance there, with that stack of proposals that reviewers are then given in the panels that are assembled of different disciplines and subheadings there, reviewers are asked to make evaluations of the merits of those proposals in each of those criteria. So for both broader impacts and for intellectual merit, reviewers are going to be assigning their assessment of that particular proposal. And in fact, reviewers are actually instructed to give a numerical rating. There's a scale that is not actually shown to applicants that's supposed to kind of correspond to a range of scores that correspond to the things that I have listed up here, the poor to excellent spectrum. But you don't actually see what that numerical value is. They have a kind of a formula that they use to try to assess sort of the range of scores that a particular reviewer gives, to try to control for the fact that there may be discrepancies in the range of scores that one individual might provide for something there. But broadly, these are the categories that you're going to see when you see reviewer comments, and these are the ones that correspond to eligibility for serious consideration for whether one is going to receive this fellowship. And so thinking about the intellectual merits, rating it as excellent, which means that it would be recommended for a fellowship, or very good, which also means recommended for a fellowship or potentially for honorable mention, which is another distinction that NSF gives to proposals that they thought were outstanding, but that they were just not able to be able to fund with the amount of resources that they had, which doesn't come with any monetary support there, but it's still a great recognition, and certainly something that can be listed on a CV or resume. And then good, fair, or poor, which are categories where you're not going to be recommended by that reviewer for consideration for a fellowship there as well. So, and we'll see this a little bit later. And if you've looked at some examples independently, you may have seen this as well. But you'll see in a reviewer's comments there that there will be this particular assessment: excellent, very good, good. And then there'll be some short comments that go along with that for each of those criteria here. So that's how the review process is actually going to go. And that's how, when you get the comments that are available to applicants whose proposals are reviewed, you can see sort of how your proposal was sorted and what that means on the basis of it. Proposals are read by at least 2 reviewers, sometimes 3, occasionally more if there are significant differences between the number of the scores that are given to a particular application, to control for one reviewer being a significant outlier there. So you'll get at least some comments as a result at the end of it there, and this is what that is going to end up looking like. So with that sort of larger look at some of the specific details that NSF provides here, we're going to focus now on unpacking a little bit more what these criteria mean in the context of this particular fellowship here. And so I want to elaborate them a little bit and try to really make clear what it is that you should be thinking about when it comes to this. So I've already mentioned, what's the contribution to science? How does this advance knowledge? And this is really important because the National Science Foundation is all about basic science. That is their mission. That is their goal. It's not applied research that they're interested in investing in. This is pure research. This is research to advance knowledge for its own sake here. Yes, it might have applications. That's broader impacts. We'll get to that in a minute here. But the focus of the intellectual merit is, how does this advance science? And what does that mean? It's going to depend on your discipline. So, there's a wide range of disciplines that are eligible here. So what advancing knowledge looks like in a field like microbiology is going to look very different from what it looks like in a field like sociology or political science, which are also eligible here. But basically, you're looking for understanding of fundamental theories, phenomena, properties, causal mechanisms, processes, those sort of things as well. And again, this is going to look different depending on your discipline here, but they're looking for results that are basically things that are testable. Is there something that can be evaluated? Can we demonstrate whether you achieved your objective or demonstrated or proved your hypothesis there? Are the results reproducible and generalizable? This is particularly the case if you're in a social science field. Is that case study that you're proposing looking at, I don't know, say economics, of migration in a particular area here, how is that particular case study going to be generalizable to our understanding of some aspect of the field of economics more broadly understood there? So those are the sort of things that are going to fall under the intellectual merit. How does the broader discipline, the subfield that you're looking at, going to be served by the type of work that you're proposing to do here? That's the basic science part of it here. That's understanding how people understand and interpret evidence within a discipline, how they assess and evaluate the nature of particular claims there, how they understand the fundamental phenomenon processes, particularly when we're thinking about like the life sciences that are taking place. So that's really a little bit more to understand what intellectual merit means, because NSF is very brief. They just say, how does it advance knowledge? How does it contribute to your field there? So I think it's useful to spend a little bit more time trying to elaborate on that, because that's not always immediately clear. And I'm always happy to talk with any applicants as well, in addition to, of course, the support that hopefully you're all getting from faculty mentors and for others in your program here, to kind of think through what aspects of research might be the sort of things that you want to emphasize given this particular focus of the National Science Foundation. But again, I do really want to emphasize that what that looks like will vary substantially depending on your specific field. And so you should always refer to what those conversations are, what those expectations are within your particular discipline, and not try to make it fit to something that may not be appropriate for your field. NSF does have a lot more to say about broader impacts, in part because the criteria, I think, is less clear what exactly it means on first glance here. So this is some additional language that NSF has provided. Again, in the future, this may be revised somewhat if indeed they change the name of this criteria to societal outcomes here. But currently, this is language that NSF uses here, and I've put some specific activities in bold here because they provide concrete examples of some things that can be evidence of broader impacts. And they say, how well does the activity advance discovery and understanding while promoting teaching, training, and learning? Okay, so that's one bucket of activities that could fall under broader impacts. How well does the proposed activity broaden the participation of underrepresented groups? They give the example of gender, ethnicity, disability, geography. So that's another category of activity that applies to broader impacts here. To what extent will it enhance the infrastructure for research and education, such as facilities, instrumentation, networks, and partnerships? All right, another kind of category here. Will the results be disseminated broadly to enhance scientific and technological understanding? So how is this information, the insights that you're gaining from the research you're going to do, going to make it to audiences outside of just your particular field? And then, broadest of all, what may be the benefits of the proposed activity to society? That's a very broad claim there. I think, you could take that in a lot of different directions, but I think we can see here a number of specific examples of activities that could fall under this category of broader impacts here. So again, this is another document that NSF has provided. It's not specific to the Graduate Research Fellowship Program, but all of it is still applicable to it because it's the same criteria that are being employed by NSF and all of the grant programs that they run. Another detail that NSF includes in all of their documentation, including in the GRFP, you will find this language in the solicitation there as well, is that broader impacts may be accomplished through the research itself, through the activities that are directly related to specific research projects, or through activities that are supported by but are complementary to the project. So broader impacts don't just have to be like the applications of research. It could be something like as a result of doing this research in organic chemistry, we may gain insights that have applications to the better understanding of a particular human health condition. That's an example of the research itself potentially having a broader impact. Its results informing practice and applications there. But it might be that the way you conduct the research provides an opportunity for broader impacts. Maybe there are opportunities for teaching and mentoring, in the way that the data is collected and analyzed there. So the research itself could be have opportunities for broader impact activities, or there could be things associated with that research that are not, part of it explicitly. Maybe you're going out and your lab is doing activities in the community, doing demonstrations of things that are going on in your lab, the materials that you're working on, say in an engineering program at local schools, for example. So, if you're using that research or that activity as something that is then part of other outreach work or some things like that, that's not necessarily part of the project itself. It's complementary to the project, or it's supported by that project. Those sort of things can count as broader impacts too. So NSF wants you to understand that there's a range of different ways in which you can accomplish and demonstrate that the work that you're doing has a broader impact. It doesn't just have to be a direct application of the research itself there. It can be the way that you conduct that research, or it can be the way that you are involved as a scientist in the larger world, and the fact that you are using your research experience as part of that outreach activity can also be something that speaks to this particular criteria here. So definitely want to think multifacetedly about everything that you're doing, because you may find that there are more examples of broader impacts than you initially may have thought about when you first encountered this, or maybe were first thinking about ideas that you could bring into the things that you're going to be writing here. And that's one of the things I'm hoping that you'll take away from today. Some examples that you will then be able to tailor to the specific requirements of the research statement and the personal statement that we're going to be taking a deep dive into in a couple of weeks here. So with all of those examples that I mentioned before, NSF offers some specific additional details about what that could actually look like. They give some concrete instances of all those sort of things there. But because this is advice that goes out to everything that NSF funds, this is not just tailored for current or prospective graduate students. And so some of their examples are just not going to be that relevant here. And so what I wanted to do is let you see what NSF's examples are, and then I came up with some examples that I think are more realistic for what that could look like in the context of a current or prospective graduate student here. Because you can think of how some of the things that you are able to do at that level are analogous, or in some cases, direct examples of the sort of things that NSF is looking at. So one of the examples that they give for promoting teaching, training, and learning, they talk about training graduate students, mentoring postdocs, junior faculty, involving undergraduates in research experiences, participating in recruitment, training, and professional development of K through 12 STEM teachers. So a lot of those examples are things that you would only do if you were a PI yourself. If you're an independent investigator, if you got your own lab, you're a tenure track faculty member at a university. So some of those are not things that you could do, as a rising senior or current graduate students, but there are a number of examples of analogous sort of things that you could do that would speak to this particular criteria. And so that would include things like, have you worked with undergraduates? Say if you're a current grad student, if you had opportunities to provide any sort of mentorship or training to others in your lab. This could be formally, this could be informally. Have you been involved in any sort of public-facing presentations with sort of an educational focus to this? Maybe this could be presentations on campus. Maybe this could be, again, outreach to schools or local organizations. Maybe this is the fact that you may be involved in teaching, mentoring, or tutoring experiences. Again, maybe this is something formal. Maybe you're volunteering or working with the Student Success Center on campus, for example, here. Or again, maybe this is just something that you've done in a volunteer capacity, maybe with a local organization, or maybe again, in your research group, you've had that opportunity to kind of provide some guidance and training to, say, people who are at an earlier stage in their research work and experience than you are there. And again, there are a lot of outreach programs around STEM education, many of them connected with public schools or after school programs. If you've had a chance to be involved in any of those, those can all be examples of promoting teaching, training, and learning. So think about anything that you've done that might fit into that. And again, it doesn't necessarily have to be a formal position, where you were the president of this student organization that did this thing there. It could be some things where, again, you've just had that opportunity or responsibility as a result of other roles that you've been in for that, that can speak to your ability to make an impact by training, teaching, supporting, mentoring others here. So that's one example of what that might look like in the context of this particular fellowship of a broader impact for that. One point that I want to make now that I should have made a little bit earlier as well is that when it comes to this criteria here, NSF is not expecting any one person or any one proposal to hit on every single aspect of that. So I know I gave a bunch of examples that NSF provides earlier of what broader impacts can look like. Those are meant to just to stimulate possibilities there. It's not meant to be a requirement that you have to do every single one of these things. It's not meant to be an exhaustive list. It's meant to help you understand in general the types of activities that NSF thinks are desirable and that support its larger mission here. So I suspect that anybody who's considering applying this, as we go through some of this here, will see some and think, yes, I've got some experience here. I can point to some specific things that I've done for that. That's great. You may see some other ones and think, I've just never had that opportunity, or I've never thought of that. Don't panic. Don't assume that that means you can't apply for this or that you wouldn't be competitive, because again, the expectation is not that you have a significant experience in every single one of these areas here. But this is just one potential form of broader impact that could be considered here, the teaching, training, and learning. Another example from NSF, from that earlier list of potential categories of activity that we looked at there, that was broadening the participation of underrepresented groups. And so NSF example of what this might look like there is to establish collaborations with students and faculty from institutions and organizations serving women, minorities, and other groups underrepresented in the sciences. Well, you're, say, a rising senior, or you're a first-year graduate student. You're not really in a position where you can single-handedly go out and establish a formal partnership with a minority-serving institution, or with a particular program, perhaps, that is meant to provide opportunities for women in STEM or something like that. So what are the sort of things that you can do? Some examples that would be, more accessible to students is, again, thinking back to the previous one, anything related to mentoring, teaching, and tutoring, showing that interest in outreach and providing opportunity and providing guidance to individuals. This is also a place, too, where an applicant's own background or lived experience could potentially be useful here as well. Again, depending on your own background, identity, you might be able to speak to the fact that your own experience as somebody from an underrepresented background in the sciences gives you a particular perspective that will allow you to be effective in connecting with others, because you understand that lived experience there. So again, your own life, your own experience can be potential for broader impact activity, because you do have something distinct that may allow for connections, may allow for opportunities to build relationships that may not be available to others whose background or whose life experience differs from your own. So that's something that could potentially speak to this category as well. And again, there are also a lot of organizations, in communities, certainly at the University of South Carolina, or other institutions that you may have attended if you're coming here now as an incoming graduate student, related to increasing access to greater inclusion, representation, to increasing awareness of STEM subjects and careers and things like that in a variety of different capacities there. So if you've ever done that kind of work, if that's ever been part of volunteering, or if you've been part of organizations that have done that, maybe not with a STEM focus, that could still be evidence of your interest and ability in pursuing that, and that could be indicating how you might want to continue to do those sort of things going forward here. So again, some additional examples of what that might look like for students who are not in the position of, say, tenure track faculty members of big grants and things like that, to go ahead and establish these sort of formal partnerships and create programs that might be able to particularly engage with individuals from underrepresented backgrounds. Here's another example that I think could be challenging as well from NSF's list: enhanced infrastructure for research and education. And the examples they give include establishing collaborations with researchers in industry and government laboratories, developing partnerships with international academic institutions and organizations, and building networks of U.S. colleges and universities. Again, what are you going to do with that if you are a current grad student or a prospective grad student? This is very much language that's aimed at faculty and in some cases even at institutions who might be applying for larger grants to develop big programs and not just individual fellowships here. But you as a student may have had opportunities to, again, partner with some community groups or other organizations. You may have had a chance to collaborate with scholars at other institutions. Maybe you've done a research experience through undergraduates or a similar type program, DAAD Rise, that allows you to collaborate with researchers in other places there. Maybe you've done an internship, you've had a chance to do some industry experience there as well. You can point to that and talk about, I have personal experience collaborating, which is going to prepare me to be an effective collaborator going forward in my career. I've got experience working in industry and understanding how the work of the lab can be translated into commercial technology or to research that serves the priorities of a particular government agency there. So those are some things that you may have had experience with: doing internships, doing collaborative research, participating in research opportunities outside of your own campus, that I think speak to some of the intent behind this particular category as well. So again, don't be intimidated by that big language that really is not meant for individual students there. Instead, think about those kind of examples because I imagine many of you have had experiences that might align with some of that. And again, if you haven't, that doesn't mean that you can't apply for this because again, the expectation is not that you have done every single one of these things, but rather that these are examples of potential activities that can be broader impact examples. And then another one that was emphasized by NSF is that the results are disseminated broadly. And the example that NSF provides is presenting results of research and educational projects in formats useful to students, scientists and engineers, members of Congress, teachers, and the general public. Okay, it's unlikely that you will be called to testify before a congressional committee, but you can definitely share your research. You can do a poster presentation. If you're a current undergraduate here, have you done a poster for Discover USC? Have you done a session at a conference there? Again, this is another place where you could point to outreach activities. If you've done any sort of session or program in schools, or again, I know a number of programs at the university here do things that involve bringing students to campus or putting on events for them as well. If you're part of the Brain Bee or something like that, that's an example of disseminating scientific results here. Some students, talk about their scientific interests on social media. Do you have a blog, or do you have an active social media presence where you're talking about the things that you're doing there? That can be an example of public science. If you ever contributed something to a public-facing publication, written a short article about your experience for some sort of online media outlet, for example, or done an interview for a podcast or something like that, or maybe started your own podcast to talk about your work. All of this is examples of science dissemination, of taking the things that you're doing in your lab or research environment or whatever that looks like in your discipline, and making it known outside of that particular academic context there. So those are the sort of things that NSF wants. And so again, anything you've done along those opportunities there to present your work outside of just the narrow academic audience or of other scholars and practitioners in your field could be an example of disseminating those results more broadly here. And then lastly, NSF says benefits to society is another broad category here. The examples they give for that is results applied to other fields of science and technology, to create startup companies, to improve commercial technology, to inform public policy, to enhance national security. Again, some of this seems pretty big, sort of thing that maybe that research experience you had as an undergraduate doesn't have you doing quite at this level here, but you can still talk about how the research you've done will perhaps be of interest or benefit to other disciplines. how it might have the potential to solve problems for industry. Or if you're in an engineering field or computer science field, for example, a lot of that is done to solve very practical problems that are pressing, sometimes for businesses, but also for the larger world. Technology that has the potential to do things like help facilitate the transition to green energy, or things that can address larger social problems. Marine science that might have the ability to impact water quality or resilience for coastal communities, things like that. Thinking about how your research has that potential for benefits can be examples of the kind of social benefits that NSF sees as desirable here. So again, these are a wide range of different types of broader impact activity. In each case, I hope that you can see how there are ways in which, even as a current undergraduate or prospective graduate student or current graduate student, that you could be doing things that could speak to all those different aspects here. And so I'm hoping you're seeing some things that resonate with your own experiences, so that you can start identifying the type of examples and evidence that really demonstrates your own broader impact. And again, we'll talk in more detail in the upcoming workshops what that really looks like in the context of a personal statement and what that really looks like in the context of a research statement here. All right, I don't know if any of our fellowship peer mentors were able to join us here this evening. Let me take a quick peek. I thought that one of them might be able to, but no, I don't know. It looks like no here. So instead, what I will briefly do here is make a plug for the great faculty, advisors and supporters that we have, and the great group of current graduate students who have received this fellowship that we have. You can find their information on our website and also in a document that is available in the Microsoft Teams group that if you don't have access to yet, you will be getting access to later. So I do just want to flag that we have a number of faculty volunteers and current graduate students who are happy to help, who have experience either applying for and receiving this opportunity themselves, or in some cases serving as reviewers, or in some cases mentoring students of theirs who have gone on to receive this particular award here. And so in addition to sessions like this and the ability to meet with the National Fellowships Office, we encourage everyone to tap into these additional resources, again, in addition to hopefully the support and mentorship that you are receiving through your specific program and the faculty that you may already be working with. So the next thing that I want us to do here, as we're getting closer to the end of our time, is to think about what does this actually look like in the context of reviewer comments for the Graduate Research Fellowship program here. So in a minute, we'll take a look at some comments that were given specifically to students at USC, but this is an example that you can find online. It's from a crowdsourced database of successful GRFP applications. And I just pulled it because I think it points to some of the things that we've looked at here as well, and provide some very good specific examples that I think would be helpful here for it. So this was somebody who was a second-year graduate student in a cognitive neuroscience program, received this fellowship in 2022. And you can just take a look and see how did reviewers assess this particular applicant's intellectual merits. And the overall, at least for one of these reviews here, overall assessment was very good. And this is some of the things that they highlighted there. Applicant shows strong intellectual merit, overcoming obstacles in the way to becoming a promising young scientist. Undergraduate GPA was low, but transition to graduate school more than overcomes this. So that's something to think about as well, too. You're not don't necessarily count yourself out because you had a bad semester at some point in your academic career or something there. The application is a place where you can provide some context for that, and where you can point to some other experiences that may provide a more representative case for your abilities and potential there. Points to the fact that this person did a postbac and was able to publish and present a number of works as a result of that. And points to the specific letters of recommendation, the details that they're able to provide there. Notes that there's a clearly written research plan with a reasonable methodology. Does note that there could be some better organization of how the information is presented, but all that information is there. So this is intellectual merit. How is this individual going to contribute to their particular field here? And it looks at their research productivity. It looks at their academic achievements there. It looks at the way in which they are able to formulate and present their own research ideas in the proposal. So again, some specific things that stood out to reviewers in this particular case. If we shift to the broader impacts here, this reviewer assessed this particular application as excellent and offered the following comments there. Noted that this applicant has shown a desire to work with students from underserved backgrounds and to overcome barriers to STEM, and points to some specific evidence of that they were part of a bridge program at another institution there while still as a graduate school there. Notes that there could be clearer plans for the future, but feels very confident that based on the strength of their track record, that this is still somebody who's going to be involved there. Also notes that there could be a little bit more attention to broad scientific impact or benefit to society at large. And I want to flag those factors as well, because this is very typical that even if you get very high marks, like very good or excellent, it's common to also have some critique in there as well. So again, it doesn't mean that your application has to be absolutely flawless and there's nothing that could possibly be improved upon to be competitive for this award. Reviewers are still, if they're doing a good job, able to recognize strong potential, even while noting that there may be things that could be improved, because everything can be improved. But again, even people who receive this award and who score very highly, reviewers will still sometimes draw attention to some things that could be improved upon. And that's normal, and that's just the nature of getting feedback. Certainly, I would think anybody who is currently a graduate student or applying to graduate school has familiarity with that experience as well. So let's take a look at some comments that have been received by students at the University of South Carolina here. So these have been anonymized from student applicants, and while all of these contain some critiques that have been sometimes made of intellectual merit, this come from a range. Some of these are recipients, some of these are non-recipients, some of these were people who received honorable mention. And again, you can't tell just from the information that I pulled here which one of those categories it would fall into. So again, this is a reminder that everybody is going to have some critical comments that are written with the goal of trying to strengthen the applicant's future ideas there, but also showing some of the things that reviewers pay attention to. So the proposed research is well written and thought out. It could be improved by adding clear hypotheses for each aim. Additional consideration should be given to potential problems and alternative strategies. So these comments, again, are meant to help you recognize the sort of things that stand out to reviewers. What are they looking for? So that when you're working on your application, you can make sure you're considering those things as well. Another reviewer commented, each aim includes its experimental plan, but unfortunately, they do not clearly state the hypothesis for each of the studies. Okay, so again, that's something, depending on your field, if you are doing hypothesis-driven research with those type of aims there, that's something that a reviewer may be interested in seeing here. The work ideas were well presented and have some preliminary results, but still a concrete plan would be needed. So, having preliminary results, helpful. Having a specific plan, very important as well here. And then the last example I have, 3 promising research themes have been identified, but little methodological details are provided, no discussion of the challenges anticipated in the proposed research. So that's something else that people are looking for when they're thinking about intellectual merits. Have you provided enough detail to understand the methods you're going to be employing here? We'll talk about that more at the research statements. Have you thought about what could go wrong, and indicated that you have some ideas about how you would pivot in that sort of instance there? That was something that a couple of these comments touched on here as well. So again, these are just samples. They come from different fields. They come from people who received awards, who did not receive the GRFP, but I think they all show you some of the things that reviewers are looking for when they think about intellectual merit. So when you're thinking about what kind of evidence can I point to that demonstrates that, these are some of the factors that stand out to reviewers here. We'll do the same thing here with broader impacts. And again, just like before, this comes from previous applicants from the University of South Carolina. who both received and did not receive the fellowship or received an honorable mention here as well. So what are they thinking about when they're thinking about broader impacts for reviewers here? So one reviewer for a particular application wrote, applicant could have strengthened their proposal by providing additional information or examples about the real world applications of their work. Okay, so they do want to know, how could this research be put to use outside of just its pure science contribution there. Another reviewer for different proposals said, I would like to see the proposal include more plans for future activity regarding broader impacts. So thinking about not just what you have done in the past, but what are you planning to do in the future is something that is part of broader impacts as well. So that's also something that can be useful too. You know, not just thinking about whether you've had an opportunity to do something previously, but also what are you going to be able to do in the future can be important for this as well. Another example, the applicant was involved in several outreach activities, and I feel they will impact society in their own way too. The applicant may become a role model for other first-generation students. So this one also goes back, I think, to the point I was making earlier, that sometimes your own experience, just your own life story, your own background identity, can speak to broader impact potential as well. This is something this reviewer noted, and clearly that the applicant must have written about their own experiences being a first-generation student as part of their application here. The last example that I have for us, the proposal includes evidence of strong leadership and mentoring qualities with support for the scientific community, more concrete plans regarding broadening participation, communicating research findings to the general public would strengthen the proposal. So some specific plans, some concrete plans, some ideas for actual ways in which you might pursue this. There's the sort of things that that reviewers look for. So as with intellectual merit, this is meant to give you a sense of some of the specific things that might stand out to a reviewer, so that you can be thinking about how you might want to address that, or what sort of goals or ideas or previous experiences you have that can speak to these particular understandings of what broader impacts looks like here. And you can find additional examples of reviewer comments. But again, I selected these from a range of different outcomes and a range of different disciplines, because you'll see that there's a lot of commonality across this here, even though some things are going to be different depending on the field that an applicant is in. All right, so as we are coming up to the end of our time here, I'm going to share a document with you all that you can make use of for thinking about intellectual merit and broader impacts and thinking about potential future plans here. If I can find it. And this is also going to be available in the Teams group as well. But I'll go ahead and share it with you in the chat. And really, these are some questions and a couple links that might be relevant for some students for thinking about things that you might be able to do in the coming year that can help you demonstrate additional evidence for any of these particular categories here. So what are the things that you've done that demonstrate your intellectual merit or broader impacts? And what can you do between now and when the GRFP deadline that perhaps can build upon this? You know, that's one thing, because you still have some time. You have a chance maybe to get involved in some opportunities here in the fall semester. But again, also, as that one reviewer comment that I highlighted a moment ago points out, reviewers want to know, what are your future plans as well? So are there some specific goals you can set for yourself for the coming academic year in terms of involvement, in terms of, maybe submitting an article to a particular journal, or participating in a conference, or joining a particular student organization, or participating in a particular outreach activity? That future-looking piece can be important as well here. And so some of the things on the article are some resources. If you haven't felt like you've had a chance to get involved as much as maybe you'd like to, or maybe you're coming to this campus for the first time and aren't really sure what all is going on there, there's some things on there that can help you get connected with some of the things that are already taking place on campus, in addition to some things that maybe your research group is already involved in here as well. And then, again, if you don't know where you're going to be, you're applying maybe to a range of different graduate programs there, are there types of activities that you want to be involved in? If you're really focusing your application maybe around a particular graduate program, do some research and figure out what some of the things that you might be able to do if you were to be a student there. So again, the takeaway from this, I hope, is not that, oh, I haven't done enough because I don't have enough evidence for all of these pieces there. Certainly having had a strong track record in this is going to be very, very helpful, but it's also partly about that future vision piece. And so what can you propose for the future that seems to build credibly on things that you've done in the past can also be important here as well. So I'd encourage you to not just go back and think of the previous experiences you have or current involvement there, but also to think about, if there's an area where you'd like to have more experience, what are some specific goals that you can set for yourself for the coming months or the coming academic year that kind of hold yourself accountable and that might also be able to provide a stronger application for this particular fellowship opportunity. So take some time to reflect on that going forward in the coming days. And again, I'm happy to talk with anybody individually about what that can look like here. All right, I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing my screen and we'll take some questions. And I will also stop the recording at this time.